Good evening, everybody. Brian Neubert here from goldenblack.com, live in the searing lights of Mackey Arena. So trying to figure out the best place to sit where I'm not radioactive, glowing during these rap videos. It'll be a process. Just in time for the end of the season, I'll figure out exactly how to handle the blinding lights that are radiating off of my face right into your eyes. Anyway, this is your goldenblack.com rap video following Purdue 75-70 win over the Fight Northwesterns of Northwestern. This is brought to you by our friends at the newly reinvented Purdue Union Club Hotel. You guys are going to want to check them out next time you plan a trip to campus. Take my word for it. Diving in here, Purdue wins 75-70 over Northwestern. This was not easy, although a lot of this was cosmetic. Purdue was up 13 in the first half. I think it was much more reflective of reality than was the three-point margin they actually had at half. Northwestern made 4 threes in the final 2.5 minutes to kind of get a reset of sorts at halftime. Couldn't really make anything of it. Obviously, Purdue only wins this game by 5, but that was because Purdue temporarily lost the ability to inbound the basketball against pressure. They had led by as many as 9 there in the last couple minutes. The game was over essentially then. But the final score got cleaned up by Purdue's inability to inbound the ball against the vaunted full court pressure of the Northwestern Wildcats. Biggest point from this is, I'll tell you the same thing I told you the first time I saw Jaden Ivey really play AAU basketball. He's a star. He is going to be a star if he's not a star already. That's overstating things ever so slightly. He's only a freshman. But you've seen what he's capable of this season. He is a guy who, raises Purdue's offensive ceiling and consequently its ceiling, period. A whole other peg. As the best way I can think of to put it is Jaden Ivey is the kind of guy that Purdue loses to in the NCAA tournament. He's a pro. He is a really, really high-level talent. He's a Kentucky, Kansas, Duke sort of talent. I don't know if anybody necessarily recognized that in high school. I did the first time I saw him, again, really play AAU basketball. If you watched him on the UIBL a couple years ago, it was pretty obvious. And, Purdue has something, pretty special here in its hands. And, the thing that, never mind the 20 points. Okay, let's just put the 20 points aside for a second, hard as that may be to do, considering that was like a third to a quarter of Purdue's points. And just look at the plays he made to start the second half. When you are the focal point of the other team's defense and they're overcommitting to you, oftentimes the best thing you can do to help your team is simply make the right play. Purdue's had guys in the past where it didn't always click with them, and the coaches had to fight them like crazy to do that. And Jaden Ivey, as a freshman here, is coming off ball screens to start the second half. Northwestern's hedging the ball screen. They're staying with them. They're committing 2 guys to 1 guy. So the other guy who's involved in the 3-man action has to either guard Mason Gillis or has to guard the roll man going to the basket. So oftentimes, this is how Grady Eifert and Aaron Wheeler got all their threes a couple years ago. They shoot out to the top of the key. They're called the indirect. And oftentimes they're going to be wide open for 3. And Jaden Ivey makes the right play both of those times. Mason Gillis makes both of those threes. That was a huge sequence in this game. That is a freshman who's riding a career night thus far, albeit in a young career, making the right basketball play at the right time. And that speaks to not only the guy's really, really high-level talent, but also just his ability to keep a cool head about him. I know that's not what you necessarily associate with Jaden Ivey at this point because he is aggressive to a fault at times. But in those moments, him having the presence of mind to make that play, speaks volumes about his basketball DNA, his IQ, his however you want to put it. He was special tonight, whatever portion of the day / afternoon it was when he actually did the things I'm talking about. I don't know. This was a special late afternoon for Jaden Ivey. We'll put it that way. That's probably the best way to be accurate here. A special dusk for Jaden Ivey. How about that? He was really good, but I mean, you can just go down the list here. Zach Edey was fantastic in this game. I know he got tied up by the Lilliputians around his feet quite often. A few times on offense, didn't finish around the basket the way you would like a guy who's a foot taller than the people guarding him to do. But what he did at the defensive end and what he did at the foul line were, if Jaden Ivey was the difference in this game, difference 1A, I think Zach Edey's ability to do what he did in this game was 1B. Because keep in mind, everything that Zach Edey did when he was on the floor, he did in place of a guy who is going to get first-team All-Big Ten votes here in a couple of weeks. That would be Travion Williams. So not only was Zach Edey good on his own, but he was good in place of a guy who, under a lot of circumstances would be irreplaceable. So I think him blocking that shot that Brandon Newman got the dunk off, and him making those 4 straight free throws, 8 of 8 by the way for a 7'4" guy today. You don't see that every day. That was what put this game away, and that was a really pivotal stretch for Purdue. What he did on the defensive end from start to finish here, I think, was a big difference in this game too. I don't know what Northwestern shot. 44%. That's not that impressive. That completely belies my point. But I thought he really made an impact defensively and just played really well. And this is another guy. Hey, he's a freshman. He's however long he's going to be here, he's going to be really good. And we just go down the list of these freshmen. Mason Gillis is a guy who has made his way this year, as a garbage man. Done a really good job doing so. Has brought a real competitive edge, a real physical edge to this Purdue basketball team. Makes timely plays because, as I say all the time, when you play really hard, productivity finds you, the moment finds you, and it often finds Mason Gillis. In a game like this, he comes and makes 3 threes, and this is another guy who's going to be a bedrock of your program for years, and you just can't say enough about how advanced some of these guys are. For Purdue to be able to win this game, the way they won this game without Travion Williams really doing a whole lot. Being in foul trouble, you expect to beat Northwestern. You obviously expect to beat a team that's lost 8 games in a row, isn't very good, or is a little out of its league in this year's Big Ten. No matter how they started, that was clearly a fluke. This wasn't pretty. This wasn't easy, but the final margin again was cosmetic. But also, this comes down to just the realities of this Big Ten season. Nothing's going to be easy when you're as young as Purdue is. When you're as inconsistent sometimes as Purdue still is, even though it's mostly been cloaked by winning this year. Not always, but oftentimes. Things aren't going to be easy, and that's what was the case again here tonight. Was Purdue's just good enough to win these games, but they're just inconsistent enough to make them, a harrowing adventure sometimes. It's funny that, this team doesn't really blow people out. They blew out Oakland. They didn't blow out Valpo. I can't remember Indiana State, but they haven't blown out anybody in the Big Ten. This was your first real opportunity to do so, probably with Northwestern being what Northwestern is. Penn State, obviously, you couldn't really blow them out. They're good, so that's a bad example. Your most one-sided win of the Big Ten season was probably at Indiana. Go figure. But it's funny, last year's team could blow people out, right? Epic proportion blowouts at times at home. Wisconsin, Iowa, Michigan State, Virginia. But when they got in close games, not so much. They weren't so good. I think what you're seeing with this team is you're seeing a team that's, in spite of its own inexperience sometimes, is just finding ways to grind out wins. I'm not saying necessarily this game was ever really in doubt. I'm just saying I don't think this is going to be a team where you ought to be picking them by 12 to 15 points against whoever. Nebraska would be the one exception to that. I've been saying that over and over again, all due respect to Nebraska, but, come on. I just think this is a team that's good enough to win games, but not so good and so consistent yet to win them decidedly. And, naturally that's going to be the case in the Big Ten too, because everybody's, pretty good and everybody's pretty balanced, with the exception of probably Nebraska and, perhaps Northwestern as well. But Purdue, again, we'll just keep going through the record. I don't even know what Purdue's Big Ten record is right now. What is this? Their 8th Big Ten win? 8 Big Ten wins, 9 Big Ten wins, whatever it is. The record's not on the box score yet. Purdue's just so far ahead of the game here in terms of where conventional logic says a team that's playing all freshmen or 5 freshmen with no seniors ought to be with a junior class too that didn't exactly come into this season as the most proven group of veterans in college basketball. I think all of Purdue's offseason questions have been answered. I don't think any one of them exists anymore. Whether that's experience, whether that's leadership, whether that's competitiveness. Those are all really important things, by the way. If you have no experience and people don't know if you're competitive, and people don't know if you have leadership, those are really big deals. And just if you just go back to the start of the pandemic, the end of last season, that's where Purdue was. They're going to be prohibitively young. They weren't very competitive this year. Leadership was bad last year. What's it going to be next year? All of those questions have been answered. And I know I'm perhaps glowing a little bit too much about Purdue here after a game that they won by 5 points over a team that had lost 8 games in a row. But I think most of you will kind of pick up what I'm putting down here in terms of where Purdue is right now and how big of a deal it is in the grand scheme of things. So that's what I got. I've talked way too long. I'm going to get sunburned from this light bouncing off my face. For goldenblack.com, this is Brian Neubert following Purdue's 75-70 win over Northwestern. Thank you to our friends at the newly reinvented Purdue Union Club Hotel. Once again, please keep them in mind next time you plan a trip to campus. And we will talk to you again after Purdue plays Minnesota at Minnesota this week. So thank you for watching. Thank you for reading. Thank you for listening. Thank you for processing our materials. However, as you process our materials, and enjoy the Super Bowl tomorrow, and go Kansas City.